And welcome back. Senator Tom Cotton has wasted little time stepping into the spotlight in Washington, D.C. He's the state's junior senator, having been elected in November 2014. He is here in person, not via satellite this morning, our first post-election non-satellite interview. Welcome and thanks for being here.
Great to be with you, Roby.
It's always good to have you in person. I can beat you up a lot easier in person than I can via satellite. Let's talk about the Camden Super Project. Big news up at the state capitol. Obviously a big Department of Defense contract. You support the state's involvement in this super project, $87 million in bonds. Based on some of your free market positions, this strikes me as a little different than what you might normally expect.
The bond issue is really a question for our state government, for Governor Hutchinson and the legislature. As Governor Hutchinson said this week, they do expect it to be net positive for state revenue, but more importantly, what I'm focused on is making sure we get the best vehicle for our troops, the best value for federal taxpayers, and hopefully good jobs in South Arkansas. Lockheed Martin is one of the 3 finalists for this vehicle that will replace the Humvee, the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle. I've met with their CEO. She's very committed to making the best bid she can, and from everything we've heard about the offer or the vehicle they've designed, it's going to be very competitive. So we're hopeful that later this summer the Department of Defense will settle on Lockheed Martin. It'll be over 600 jobs in South Arkansas.
You have seen some of the JLTV, as it's known to, and having been in combat before, I mean, what do you think of the vehicle? I mean, does it...
It's a great vehicle.
Yeah.
I chair the Air and Land Power Subcommittee of the Armed Services Committee. We've held hearings about Army modernization programs to include the JLTV. And as someone who has ridden in a Humvee in combat, I can tell you that soldiers and Marines need a new light tactical vehicle that is designed for combat. You know, the Humvee was never really designed for frontline combats to counteract roadside bombs, mines, and machine gun fire. The Joint Light Tactical Vehicle will be more survivable, it'll be more mobile, and it'll be more reliable for our soldiers and our Marines. About 50,000 new vehicles to be built over 25 years as well.
Maybe more than that if they can get some more orders beyond just the U.S. Department of Defense.
That would be the next step, and I know Lockheed is excited about that prospect. That's one reason why they're willing to make an investment on the front end of the project and try to make sure they provide the lowest price offer, because countries who are allied, like say Israel, are also going to be potential buyers for the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle once it reaches full production.
Is there anything you can do behind the scenes to help push that along a little bit? I mean, persuasively, not anything clandestine, but just...
Now, our procurement programs are designed to be insulated from that kind of political pressure. So the people who make the choice are in a selection committee, and then there's a final selection authority. That's not known publicly. It's certainly not known to the contractors, and that's the way it should be, because in the end, the most important priorities are that our troops get the very best equipment that we can provide them, and the taxpayer get the very best value for their tax dollars. But I'm pretty confident that Lockheed Martin can win on those 2 criteria.
All right, let's move on. This past week, the Clean Water Act became another issue in Arkansas that kind of garnered some front page news. The EPA ruled earlier in the week on these regulations that there's been a lot of resistance on. They say that the new rules will not impact farmers and private landowners, but you say that it will. What?
Yeah, I strongly disagree with what the EPA has done in the so-called waters of the U.S. regulation. More importantly, farmers, ranchers, outdoorsmen, home builders, oil and gas producers, foresters also disagree. They're all opposed to this overreaching regulation, which is just another example of how bureaucrats in Washington often think they know better than the people that use the lands. The federal government obviously has an important role in regulating and preventing navigable waters from being polluted, rivers like the Arkansas River, the Mississippi River. But this regulation would try to regulate the smallest body of water that are dozens of miles away from a navigable water, maybe even down to ponds or puddles on people's farms or in their yards.
It goes that far, though? I mean, the EPA contends that it does not change any of the current policy of regulating ditches. That was on page 19 of the regulations there.
No, I disagree, and I think that the EPA will use it in a way to try to extend their regulatory power over areas of land and water that is clearly not navigable, and it's not within the jurisdiction of the federal government. Really, this is a response to a Supreme Court ruling about 10 years ago that said they couldn't do so, but they've tried to find a way around it. That's why you see so many people who live off the land, farmers, ranchers, foresters, home builders, and so forth. defending property rights, opposing this regulation. That's why I've sponsored legislation that would protect the federal government's traditional role in ensuring that our navigable waters remain navigable and aren't polluted, but also protect property owners' rights.
So is legislation or litigation the only line of defense now?
Well, both of them will go forward. The House has already passed legislation similar to what I'm sponsoring in the Senate. I expect sometime this year the Senate will be acting on that legislation, which would stop this rule from going into effect and require the EPA to use sound science and act within their legal authority by the end of next year to issue a new regulation. But I also believe that a lot of those groups that we've discussed are going to be suing to block this overreach.
We love litigation. It's good for the economy there. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Stick with me through this break, and we're going to come back more with Tom Cotton right after. A huge area where there has been a lack of consensus in the past in Congress. There seems to be some consensus forming in the House, at least, for some type of highway program. The question is, how do we pay for it? Nobody seems to have a solution to the funding mechanism for this. What's your solution beyond raising taxes, which I don't think you're going to probably go for?
Well, no, we're not going to raise taxes to pay for the highway bill, in part because a higher gas tax is not just bad for our economy, it is also a declining revenue base itself as people drive less and vehicles get more miles to the gallon. Infrastructure has always been a core federal government function, right up there with national security, border security, criminal and civil justice. But there's a real question of how we pay for it. And the reason why we're struggling to pay for it with the Highway Trust Fund is because we're spending too much money on things other than highways, light rail, urban mass transit, landscaping, and so forth. Perhaps worthy projects, but the Highway Trust Fund should be spent on highways. And if we focused on highways, roads, and bridges, then we actually would have a trust fund that was solvent, and we wouldn't have quite the challenge that we face today. But we do need a long-term highway bill.
You're going to make some moves to limit those other types of spending?
I would like to see the Highway Trust Fund spent on highways. That was the design of it originally, and that's what we need in particular here in Arkansas. I mean, we get around on interstate highways, U.S. highways, state and county roads, and that's what we should be focusing our highway dollars on. Those other projects may be worthwhile, but they're projects that mostly should be the province of the state and the federal government.
You've been on recess this week. You've been traveling the state, lots of different appearances all over different corners of the state. What's impressed you the most this week?
Well, I have to say the memorial service for Deputy Sheriff Sonny Smith in Clarksville on Wednesday afternoon.
Did you know him?
I did not know him, but I attended the memorial service as I try to do any time an officer is killed in the line of duty, and over 1,000 people from Clarksville turned out. His teenage daughter spoke very eloquently about him and the lessons they had learned from him. One of them said that he taught them to always defend what's their own, stand up for what's right, and never back down. I think that's a great lesson for parents to pass on to their kids, and the turnout there and the testimonials to Sonny Smith are a real testimony to him as a father, as a man, as a deputy sheriff, as a Navy veteran.
It's a touching ceremony there. I don't want to end on such a sad note, okay? So let's shift gears. Let's talk about the GOP Presidential Field. We have about, 47 people running at this point in time? Huckabee, Santorum, Graham, Walker, Bush.
Seems like everyone.
Rubio, Rand, Cruz. I could go on and on. Rand Paul. Who do you think is the favorite at this point in time? Is there a clear or definitive leader right now?
No, I don't think there's a front runner. I think it's a wide open competition. I think that's healthy. You know, as a conservative, I believe that competition is a good thing. Competition in the marketplace breeds better products at better prices for consumers. I think competition in the political marketplace leads to better ideas and better leaders. So I don't anticipate supporting any candidate for the time being, and I look forward as a Republican myself watching the candidates perform, telling us where they want to take the country, and ultimately making a choice with the rest of Arkansas next year during our primary.
Anybody you can scratch off the list yet?
No, I'm looking forward to watching them all.
I try to always get you pinned down on stuff, and I never can do that. All righty, Senator Tom Cotton, great to be with you.
Thanks, Roby.
Thanks for being here.